take a Rodeo offline. Here's some ideas.
I think we're being recorded, right?
Yeah. No, not right now.
I think we have.
Oh, that light's on, so.
Well, the sound isn't.
I know, right when you see that light on, it means,
Yeah, I saw it. Usually that means to be.
I don't know.
So I don't know if Romeo was in the service tunnel.
But just going through it, so I mean, it's tough. And then to do it, you know, right away with my dad. My dad started his chemo treatment the day of my mom's funeral. And it's like, it's so hard. It's hard on your family. It's hard on, it's tough.
What's that? Did you also?
No, we're just talking about like just cancer in general.
Oh, I see. I haven't.
No.
So,
It's been a lot.
hello, hello.
My mom is year 2 was the anniversary.
I'm sorry.
And so, yeah, it's just so, you know, you look back and you think, gosh, that just, and you shouldn't go that way. You should like wait your whole life and you know, it's supposed to be a beautiful thing.
When did she pass this time?
2 years ago, just this was the anniversary, so just 2 days ago, 3 days ago. So,
Yeah.
and it's,
Plus on me.
you know, it just doesn't get.
Yeah,
It gets easier, but it gets like you like.
so permanent.
There's just so much like with the paperwork, and then just that keeps reminding you of it, like all of the awful things.
Right.
You know, and it's like it's like you know treatment is just treatment's tough on a body. To see that and it's just hard. And my mom was like, oh my gosh, she was just always like the happy-go-lucky, and it just you know it's a tough fight. Tough fight for anyone.
Oh. No, I keep getting a short chair.
Something that was doing
They all give me the short chair.
I think a lot of people are being like either like villains, like Disney villains or something. Yeah. Hi everyone.
Thank you.
I didn't be there long enough, but my kid isn't like 6:30, 6:45. I was at the middle school today. And then you can have the no, I don't think we're airing. I think the camera's set.
I'm gonna talk to you here.
The first part is right here.
Hello.
Hey Josh.
I'm gonna email. Not as far as. I don't want that.
Kleenex?
Always.
Yes. That I have.
All.
I'm serving the room at water because it's cold.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And this is
I'm
the
not
land of warm water.
Oh, yeah. I'm open up for boots.
Thank you.
Well, I am as well. Now that I'm over the half-century mark.
Yes. Really?
Yeah, Tuesday was my 51st. Well, okay, you'll have to vote
And it's
now.
really not about that. It's really about how
Surrounded by all these young people.
culture is so like on social media and how there's a direct attack.
I'll be 40 in 2 weeks.
That's really.
So you're not old enough to vote.
Hey Don.
I mean, we got
How's,
the landscaper coming
how's
over,
home?
they want.
Well, I didn't go home this time. I went to
Jasper,
Burbank, and we went to Santa Barbara and cruised like teenagers.
We'll go by
I like-
one of those little
I
towns.
just wanted to look pretty, like,
Oh, sorry.
Like what, down
like somebody who gave us a quote a year ago at like 12, which is good. That's what's starting to end a little grass too.
I
It's
stayed
our
at bed
escapes
and
are
breakfast.
constantly
Pretty good. Cheshire
just to,
cat.
in case we do off.
And so in Oxnard was a steampunk festival. I had no idea what steampunk
Hey, Jeff.
festival was.
Alright.
So I didn't know.
It's people's desire to go back to the industrial age, but without the pollution.
It was like, reminded me of Clockwork Orange and Costume Fetish. So they had music, punk music, you know, in school, so I filmed it. And I sent it to my kids and my grandkids.
That's fine.
Yeah. The response was, no, it's funny. You're where? No, watching steampunk live concert with your grandma. We were the only ones who went in costume.
Or maybe you would.
Well, do people say, hey, were you there? Were you the original?
Or no, if you were there, if you remember it, then you weren't there.
You guys
Right.
do yours.
Okay.
Pretty
Right.
brief, but
So,
it's,
so we did something crazy. We mostly just hung out and drove
yeah,
around.
where I can just
Did a big thing.
take it before the explosion starts.
We just hung out.
Did you want wine?
Good work.
Did you want wine?
So,
Perfect.
it was good.
It's another day.
For those of you,
Oh, sure. It's a good break. It's not
Hey,
that
Howard.
far away.
Hey, how are you? Gentlemen, ladies.
hey, Jeff,
So,
how are you?
we put our tractor.
Wonderful.
Yes, how'd that go?
We did pretty.
I love self-evaluation.
Okay, so, what I'm thinking is that, anybody can play the game, knowing you're in the playoffs, you don't have to practice.
I think it's the timeline.
That must be.
It must be that.
Well, right.
So he's gonna do, I'll do an
It needs
introduction,
to-
he's gonna do kind of the main body, he's gonna emphasize the story, photos of him, you know,
No,
you know,
I don't know if
we get to all of them, and then go to 11, I'll get a little speech about, so we start with, that's what we did.
I think it's
And then January also.
I know.
it's the same thing. You know what I mean? It's not.
And,
It's always making
don't
them try.
just say read the staff.
But it's fun to
Answer
have
questions,
fun.
board after board,
Oh,
so
yeah.
all
Clear,
since
like,
February.
Yeah, no, it's all or nothing. This one's for these lights right here.
Then it's what do you do with the kids piece? Record ready.
Because I hope you find what I'm saying. Oh, because
Which makes sense. So you're gonna have to walk all the way on the side.
Okay, wait a minute.
I was laughing in there because I'm like, I'm gonna say, we're only doing this because Mr. Blake is recommending it.
Okay.
And we
so-
believe in what
so
he has to
my-
say.
We'll let a little bit of half stuff. Just a little.
Hey, you know, when you come in late to a conversation, that's the only part.
She and your department.
Really, this part of the time, I really didn't know.
Do you know my dad?
Yes, for some reason.
But you knew that already.
Yes.
Is Lisa gonna be here?
Yeah, should be.
Did you want to introduce her tonight, or she's, we met yesterday, and we're talking about her services.
I think we should leave that out of today.
Maybe the 30th?
Definitely. But that's, it's kind of up to Michael, but I would, this was, did we discuss this?
Yes. Yeah, I'm gonna say, basically, things that we've been working on Yeah, it's good. It's great. It's good, but I mean, obviously,
Here's our,
That's how it has to be couched,
that's our presentation.
so.
Hi, Michelle. How are you? Good. Adam, how are you? This is Jeff Brown. You're sitting right in quite a crowd. Yeah. We're just looking at if we tear things out, make a mess. You've got my vote.
How are you? Nice to see you.
Oh, are you running for the board?
No way. You know what? I don't blame you. Yeah, well, that's kind of a.
Sure.
But we talked about having like. Yeah. I just didn't know. Yeah, I see it. It's really cheap, but there's a lot of stuff in it. This is. Yeah, perfect. I think it's good.
Okay, we'll wait. Yeah, she's 30 seconds.
No, I was sick. I just stomach ache. But I'm fine today. You know, this Italian stuff, yeah. Big yes. Well, just the big yes.
Okay. Yeah, we're insured. Okay. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Ms. Korbatoff has went to the wrong building, so she'll be over in a second. Dr. Berge, I don't have a agenda in front of me. I assume we're
we're going to go right into.
Do we have, is there an
facilities.
approval of the agenda on this one, or are we just right into the study session?
I didn't.
Right, thank you, okay. No, I don't think we have to for the study session. Was there a pledge on this, on the agenda? Nope, okay, we're good. Moving right along. Dr. Breggy.
So the board has had a lot of questions about facilities and how facilities, how that information has been updated since Measure BH thankfully passed. So the purpose of our meeting today is to have a discussion and an update to the Board of Education about kind of that missing piece. So the construction and how that fits in with facilities and how that fits into our long-term plan as a school district. And I believe we're going to start with Mr. Pileman or Mr. Blake.
It's hard for me to follow, Jeff. For us, it's kind of exciting for us to, this is our first presentation of updates regarding construction, facilities, where we are and what we've been able to accomplish and what we are recommending is a pathway to go forward. And we'll have more of these. I think we'll have another one on the 26th regarding methodologies for deliverables for the construction process, which we feel is very, very important and will set the stage for moving forward and accomplishing what we set out and what we promised in the BH bond. So tonight, for us, a purpose for us as well as what Dr. Breggy mentioned, is to, we started in about January and February, board asked amazing questions, and a lot of them, about construction, about facilities, how things could work educationally, what would be options. So we began as a staff in February to begin to look at, we approached it this way. What if the bond does not pass and we have $145 million in our wallet and we're looking at B1, B2 and El Rodeo in only being able to accomplish a portion of El Rodeo's total project. So with that in mind, in February, we began to face some hard decisions and facts about what is best, what happens if the bond is not passed, do we have enough money, and what would the implications be in how we would approach El Rodeo. The second piece was, if a bond did pass, then what would our strategy be and how would we approach the total master plan and what areas could be improved in terms of schedule and time and safety and economics. So since the bond has passed, our staff has been working every week on what projects, either from a DSA perspective or a schedule perspective, could be started earlier, could be managed simultaneously, and our overall charge, if you will, was to start as much construction as humanly possible and finish it as soon as possible, as economically as possible. So we've been working on that since February. Tonight, it's an update of the work that we've been able to do on Measure E, completing work that was originally begun in that time frame, and beginning to look forward to how can we look at BH and the consequence of being able to fund those projects. How would we do it? And tonight is our presentation and result of much time with board members, with staff, both our staff and Dr. Breggy's staff. So with that, I'll let Mr. Pileman complete that presentation.
Thank you, President Korbatoff, members of the board, Dr. Breggy. We appreciate this opportunity to share a little bit of what we've been doing for the last 3 or 4 months. As you recall, we had a study session back midwinter and laid out a master plan for the district in the event that the BH measure passed, and I'd like to kind of give you all an update of where we're at as of today on that plan. I'd like to begin with the Horace Mann School. This is a photograph of the courtyard of Building A, which serves as the main entrance to the administration area. This project was completed last winter, with the IT AV project that followed right behind and was completed over the summer. Building A is currently fully occupied and fully in use with all systems. This was the third major phase of the Horace Mann campus. Going back a little bit, WLC shared some photographs with us, and I thought I'd share them with you of the Phase 1 auditorium modernization. They had a professional photographer canvass the campus about 3 months ago, and I have these as well as several other more pictures. If you'd like them, I can pass them along. The new Building A lobby and reception area. Interior of Building A. Exterior shots of the Building B campus, which was the second major phase of the Horace Mann modernization project, as well as the north side of the Building B and the elevated soccer field. Currently, we're in the last portion of the Phase 4 site improvements of the modernization project. The only thing that remains is the erection of the lunch shelter and the play structure you see on the left picture. The forklift you see on the left of the left picture is erecting the lunch shelter. Both the lunch shelter, the play structure, and the softball surfacing beneath the play structure will be done prior to and available for use for the Harvest Festival on October 27th. On the right is a picture of Arnez Court. We've been meeting with the city of Beverly Hills regarding the condition of the perimeter of Arnez Court's cul-de-sac. And there's a scope of work there to do at the end, which is the reconstruction of those drive approaches and sidewalks. That work is included and budgeted in the Phase 4 project. Summary of the projects have been completed in process at Horace Mann. Some of them we saw slides of before. In addition to those, the interim housing was removed over the summer, as well as the Building B sports floor in the multipurpose building. And working with the city, we have the security camera system up and operational. So this is the first campus that has 100% security video feed surveillance throughout. The chiller replacement project and building a re-roof are still on schedule for next summer. Now we'll move to the Beverly Hills High School campus. Most of you have seen this overall rendering before of the master plan build out for the Beverly Hills High School. And I thought I'd bring these photos today. This is our 1929 aerial of the high school campus. So we are modernizing in the B1, B2 project from the front entrance to the left, the original B1 and B2. To the right of the front entrance is the B3 theater. You can see the Orwells in the surrounding perimeter, which are going to come up a little bit later in the presentation. And again, the 2016 aerial of the same shot of our high school. And you can see the high school represented by the horizontal red roofs along the middle of the picture. Building B1, B2. On the left is an interior shot of Building B2 first floor prior to the commencement of the modernization and after the abatement project was completed about a year and a half ago. On the right is the exterior of the building as it was last winter before the modernization project began. On the left picture, I wanted to bring your attention to the walls. I know the picture and lighting are a little bad. A little bit. We'll just get them a little bit dimmer. The walls have a white plaster coating on them still in this photograph. And what we've proceeded to do as a part of the project is to strip that white plaster coating off and begin to structurally repair the walls, wall surfaces, and concrete columns. This is also B2 on the left, is the removal of the structural slab that occurred over the summer. And on the right, the excavation of the new foundation system for the perimeter of the building. The foundations are excavated on both the interior and exterior of the walls, and the existing footings and stem walls are penetrated with the reinforcing steel to tie the new building together for a footprint that both sits on the inside and outside. One of the challenges during the footing excavation was to stabilize the existing structure. As we excavated on those exterior walls to the depth that you see here, we had to work with the structural engineer to ensure that we do not compromise the existing structure. I think that the structural engineer's comment was, we're working in a compromised building, we're trying not to compromise it further. That's our goal. These two shots are of the micropile process going on at the moment. On the left is the drilling rig, one of two drilling rigs that are currently on the site. We have 146 micropiles going 60 feet deep beneath the building. They're 10-inch caissons, and on the right you can see the 2.5-inch epoxy coated rod that will go full depth to the bottom of each caisson. Concrete is poured, cured, then the all-thread rod is torqued to pin Hi, can you hear me now? Yes. Okay, so we'll pick up on the micropile isometric for the B2 building. The building was constructed on what we call non-engineered fill. In today's modern times, you would excavate a building down to competent fill, whether that's 8, 10, 12, 14 feet, and replace that soil in compacted layers. That gives the building a firm foundation for you to pour your new concrete footing onto. What we're doing here is we're taking the building and we're pinning it down to competent fill that's deep underground for a full seismic upgrade to this building. On the left is a concrete footing on the inside of building B2, and you can see 4 pile caps, we call them. That's where the green rod is sticking up through the steel assembly. Those are 4 completed caissons that go 60 feet deep. That footing will be filled with rebar and then the concrete poured into that foundation. So the foundation is tied to the wall, and the foundation is also tied to the micropiles that go underground. So that structural system will transfer all the way up to the roof to give you your full seismic retrofit. On the right is an example of the structural wall infills. That happens to be in building B1 in the future college and career center. So we're infilling those window walls with reinforcing steel and shotcrete in preparation for the new finishes. A couple other pictures of the structural infills that are going on. This happens to be in B1.
Jeff, can you roll back a slide? Because this is a good opportunity. After I toured it, if you look at you don't have a pointer, do you?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Can you show the ceiling joist on where there's and the connection to the wall? How
Right
there's there's nothing connecting them. There's no hardware connecting those joists. It's just sitting on top of a ledge of concrete.
That is correct. I'm going to go back one.
So there's no steel connection?
There's no steel
no
connection.
hangers,
We call them joist hangers
Right.
that tie the wall to the ceiling framing. In Florida, you call them hurricane straps. What they've done is they set the steel into the soft concrete as they were pouring the building. So there's about a 2.5-inch embedment, and that's what was holding up the roof.
Is that
And the floors, right? The second floor, the same thing applied.
Second floor walking surface in building B2, you are correct.
Yeah, that's where we noticed it.
Right.
What the concern that I saw was that Legos and Tinker Toys are better engineered than that particular connection.
That is correct.
That was a concern. And when we talk about the structural integrity of the old buildings, it's important that people look at the reality. I know a lot of things have been said, but I wanted to stop and point that out so people really recognize what existed and what we're trying to address. So
That is correct.
thanks.
Is it safe to assume that most of the buildings on the campus built in that general time frame within a year or two around the same time had similar construction style?
From what we've seen of the 1920s era buildings, yes. That goes for El Rodeo as well.
So they're not structurally or seismically up to snuff in any way?
No. This building has gone through 2 seismic upgrades. I think one was in the 30s and one was in the 50s. But that type of engineering and calculations that we are putting into the building in today's modern seismic science is nowhere near what was put in the 30s. Most of that retrofit is actually being removed to make way for the retrofit for 2019 and beyond.
Thank you.
So a combination of a original construction methodology or design as well as building decay over the past 80-plus years is what we're working through at the present time. Again, structural infills here, both wall as well as the tunnels that ran around the perimeter of each of the buildings on the inside. Those tunnels were deemed to compromise the exterior building walls. We see the building shored up currently right now. The building doesn't necessarily sit right at ground level as you view it from the outside. It sits on a 4-foot tall wall that you can only see from the inside when you get in the tunnel. On the left is an example of the concrete spall, structural spall, and void identification process that went on over the summer. After we removed the plaster that I showed you in one of the earlier slides, the concrete voids and spalls, and some people call them rock pockets, were reviewed by the engineer and our DSA representative. They were marked, numbered, photographed, and mapped. The individual repair process for each of these spalls, whether it's a minor spall or a major spall, and also if it's in a structural bearing wall or non-bearing wall, were taken into consideration on what the repair process was for each of these conditions. On the right picture, you see an example of 4 structural cores through an existing wall. 160 of those structural cores were identified and approximately 95% complete being repaired at this time with rebar and high strength grout. This is 2 samples of the spall repair done with a chipping hammer to expose the original rebar to get new cement coverage in and around the rebar to bond to the wall. 2 additional pictures of spall repair. The one on the left is actually a horizontal concrete beam that's holding up a portion of the second floor in building B2. Once that chipping back to competent concrete began, both on the left and the right, the spall grew into a large void, as you can see. These 2 photographs represent the completed spall repairs. So after they're formed, poured, cured, and stripped, this is what the substrate is looking like behind the future drywall walls. You see on the right we have a few that have not been done yet, and what we've been doing with the engineer is to walk them closely to mitigate and or eliminate anything that doesn't pose a structural issue to the building for cost control purposes. It's been a very large effort over the last 60 days. Okay, now we get to some of the build back. On the left photograph is an example of the the brick repair. It is concrete brick. It's not clay brick on this building. We had 6 custom concrete bricks made by a local block manufacturer, and they were distressed and tumbled. So 1 to 2 bricks from each of those 6 samples was used to fill in half of this hole you see on the left, and what's circled are the 2 bricks that we have picked that match the existing surface the most. So there'll be approximately 2,500 of those bricks made and installed to repair the holes and openings on the exterior of the surface of the building. On the right is a mock-up. In the center of that picture is the brick restoration process that we've developed and done to serve as our mock-up for moving forward. A little tough slide to read, but this is the color rendering of the new floor plan layout for building B1 and B2. Bottom right is the first floor of building B1. The blue represents the new administrative area, counseling area, principal, assistant principal. To the left of that first floor model, you'll see an area in pink. That's a teaching area and 1 classroom on the first floor. Directly above that on the right, the large footprint is the second floor of building B2, which has 9 classrooms with operable walls on the second floor. Top left, pink, is the new media center, and on the far left in the yellow is the college and career center. Summary on B1, B2. Lead abatement was completed over the summer. Foundation work is in process. Structural steel fabrication is in full go at the shop. Some is already being delivered and installed. Wood framer is also on site doing layout and getting ready to receive material. And the foundation micropiles, as discussed, are currently being drilled. We're shooting to have 2.5 to 3 piles drilled, grouted, and tested each day, and plan to get out of the pile business by the end of November. Yeah. Okay, I'd like to move on to the oil well plugging project. Again, I pulled an old 1928 photo as kind of just a visual for us. We see the original building, and these old photos really give us, I think, give the campus and this modernization project we're doing its identity. The oil well on the left is not actually on the oil well island that we are currently working on for plugging. That's kind of in the middle of the softball field area, but right to the left of that on the edge of the photo is the drilling island, is what it's referred to, that contains the 19 oil wells on the Beverly Hills High School campus. On the left is a photograph of the flare delivery. This is the methane control flare. We could not get it off the road and up Heath and into the ball field, so it was flown with the crane up and over the walls and landed in the ball field. On the right, you can see the installed methane control flame, and behind the methane flame, you'll see that the derrick no longer is there. The flowered sound blankets that were on the old original derrick, which ones were not damaged, have been salvaged, folded, and are currently stored here on campus. Picture on the right is the well cellar. That's where all 19 wells reside, the well heads. There's a graded ceiling over the top of you. And So far on the project, we've developed and rolled out the emergency response and evacuation plan. Some of you may have seen that report that was developed between the city, fire, police, the So shall we keep going? I think it just needs to be tapped every once in a while. The tubing, rod, pump equipment in the wells are currently being removed, and cement injection is underway. The remaining projects, modernization projects scheduled for the Beverly Hills High School are listed here on this slide. These include the Measure E. Well, these are Measure BH projects. B1, B2 is a Measure E project. We want to focus a little bit on B3, B4. We're working with staff right now regarding the possibility of moving that project forward. There are some challenges and hurdles with that. Number one is obviously DSA approval. I think everyone's tired of hearing that word over the last 3 years. Nevertheless, it is moving down the road for DSA approval. Now, if we look at B3, B4 and move that up in sequence, we need to temporarily house the students that are utilizing those facilities. In B4, we have the choir and the band programs. Those are challenging programs to relocate. We have some ideas and would like to continue exploring that and bring you another update very shortly. Other projects on campus completed over the last few months or in progress. We have a couple of MTA surveillance projects going on. The interim housing, we retrofitted the Norman Aid building, I believe that is, over the summer. And we're well underway with the campus-wide security camera design to bid that out in the next 60 days and have that work take place over the winter. The building elevator, I think most of us remember that. The mechanical work has been completed after the 12-week delivery of the parts. The control board installation is the only thing that remains, and I was hoping to report that that was done today, but it is not yet operational and should be ready to schedule state inspection by next week. And we'll see how quickly we can get the state inspector on board, sign it off, and get that elevator back open. Hawthorne, the Measure BH project there is the auditorium renovation. We have DSA plan check comments back. We're currently reviewing that design. That design took a couple of different turns left and right over the course of the last few years, and we want to finalize and make sure that the scope we're going to construct is what the intended final scope and work direction is. We've surveyed that campus as well for a security camera installation project and have those schematics that are been prepared for that. Beverly Vista. Beverly Vista, we bid out, as you recall, and you approved an ADA drop-off reconstruction. So we're doing a slight redesign, and we will parking structure, we're relooking at that project from a size, scope, and cost and needs assessment standpoint. The next few pictures are presented here to kind of give you an idea of the proximity between the students and the existing building as we get ready for construction or modernization of the campus. So we're seeing about an 8-foot separation between, on the left, the kindergarten play structure area, jungle gym area, and the actual building itself. Similar on the right is the kindergarten yard. East elevation, similar close proximity. On the right is the west. Now, just on the edge of that picture is the first grade classroom, which is about 18 feet away from the building itself. This is more towards Wilshire side of the campus, on the south side. The current construction fencing is about, again, 6 to 8 feet off the building surface. This is by the middle school kids and Venture Camp. This is an aerial view of the campus showing the layout of the modular buildings on all three and a half sides of the original building itself. Also, it shows us the parking lot, which is on the left-hand side of the main building. Parking is currently impacted with staff at that campus. The principal and vice principal go ahead and park in the neighborhood because the parking lot itself is full with staff, and they actually double park. So one car pulls in front, next car pulls in the back, and to get everyone to get in there during the day. So leads us to some challenges we'll discuss here in a few moments. Okay, so an overall review of the modernization of the El Rodeo School. The obvious stands out. Our concerns and challenges and precautions and planning need to look at the noise, the dust, the vibration, and the safety related to the ongoing operation of the school, as well as parking of staff and construction staff on-site, off-site, shuttle in. I know there was a little bit of an experience of that during the abatement project, but if we're talking about a multi-year, it's something to be studied. In addition to that, the material laydown areas, the offices for construction, inspection, deliveries off of Wilshire. Do we shut down Wilshire once to twice a day to get equipment delivered and materials into the site? Establishment and erection of the crane that will be needed to do the work, and how that swing path is going to work with the existing children on site. And the impacted market that we've been talking about in the construction industry and trying to market our project out into the bidding environment to get those bids that we need to drive those prices down in our current geographical area in West Los Angeles and Beverly Hills, which all relate to cost control. This is a copy of the master plan schedule that we put together prior to the BH bond measure going on the ballot. Blue represents Measure E, green represents Measure BH, and I'd like to turn the microphone over to Don Blake for a few moments, and we'll talk about some adjustments that we're proposing on the schedule.
That's a laser put a hole in that screen. Yes, at this point, I think we're all familiar with this particular slide. This was the BH planning piece. And I think on the, so kind of have that in your mind, kind of what does that look like overall? Then let's go to the next slide, Jeff. The little arrows is kind of our way of taking the same graphic. At the top is B3 and B4. And DSA and our communication, Dr. Bragi has been very helpful with Doug Humphrey
in meeting with him a number of times, and Doug is committed to meeting with us once a month to talk about our schedule and coordinate his team in approving the projects this time around. So we have monthly coordination with DSA. The outcome of that is prioritizing. Once Doug prioritizing his staff. The outcome of that is B3 and B4 will be available, and I think, what's the date there? I can see that far, Jeff. Right. It's within the first quarter, or at worst case, the end of second quarter next year. Well, originally, as you can see, that was 2 years out. So that means B3 and B4 can move and be worked simultaneously with B1 and B2. Obviously, issues of scale and being able to coordinate the same leaseback contractor on the same site and be able to move that project forward is a great advancement economically, because remember, we're dealing with 20% a year escalation costs. That hasn't changed. It hasn't gone away or reduced. It's still true. And Doug has confirmed that from his world, where drawings were submitted in 2016 and the fees that were charged for DSA to review drawings are based on the numbers that were given in 2016. As you complete the projects, however, then you submit to finalize and close out the project the final costs for that project to DSA, and you will pay the additional fees based on the final cost, not based on what was submitted. So that's where he's able to confirm a 20% escalation is in fact real. So what that means to us is any one of these green lines we can move forward, not further out, is a huge impact, just an escalation, much less all the other issues of not trying to impact. All these sites have been impacted significantly for the last several years. We want to be able to not do that and do it efficiently and complete it as soon as possible. So that's B3, B4 concept, and at El Rodeo it has a much greater impact. Originally, the blue line for Measure E, our concern was there was not enough money in the wallet to be confident for me to suggest to the board to move forward with B1, B2, and El Rodeo A, B, C, and D. That would have left us about $3.5 million for contingency to take us out to 2021. I just couldn't make that recommendation. So that was in the early part of this year. So since the early part of this year, the staff has been resolving, again, what do we do? What's our plan if we don't pass a bond? What is our plan if we pass a bond? So what we've been working on is the red lines you see at El Rodeo. Is El Rodeo, it means that Building E and the site work and the, shoot, man. We get the, I need bigger glasses. Elevated parking. That those three projects in phases, instead of being further out there, 5 years, 70 months for the total project, and we're going to show you a slide that the result of our analysis, which is this one, the consequence of being able to move those things forward because Doug is prioritizing and we have the money to complete the prioritized scopes. This is what it means. It means that you've moved from, I think it's a 70-month schedule, and Jeff will give you the details in just a moment. I'm just giving you the overall, what has the staff been able to review here. It's not just cost and not just efficiency. It's actually safety. If we were to go back to that Google slide, when I first came here, and Mr. Parliament's previous company, S.E. Anderson, we all looked at this project, and we're not the only ones. For a number of years, anyone who has been in my seat has always looked at El Rodeo as having a problem. Particularly right here is the only laydown area for construction, just this little patch here. This area here would be inconsequential because it's taken up with an entry and traffic. So the location of buildings are in 8 feet away or 18 feet away. It's just not enough space to feel comfortable separating children from work. We've done this. All of us have worked in urban environments where we've worked with sidewalks and having to work with a limitation of a sidewalk in a building, but working with children in that same environment is not optimal. So what does that mean to the bid process? Well, it means that the contractor is looking at risk and needing a higher contingency, not because of something unknown, but because time. When you're not able to operate efficiently, the place where it's affected is time. So we're going to go through a detailed analysis of what we think is the cost saving. It's very compelling to do El Rodeo as one project. Now, some might say, well, aren't we doing at the high school, aren't we phasing projects and working around kids? Yes, we are. And it is a challenge. But we also have greater distances between students and teachers, and we're able to mitigate that. When we get to moving the current portables, that we begin to get into spaces that are getting closer to where the construction is. So it's just an issue of, believe it or not, 10 feet makes a big difference in this sense. To put a crane up, we need about a 20-foot by 20-foot space to put the base in. That's not the problem. The problem is the swing space. Just like when we put the crane in at doing the oil well, we need a fall zone, a safe zone. So when you're making that swing, I've lost 5 men in my career in 40 years of construction. So I speak with a little bit of experience on this matter. Major projects, high-rise construction, where what's called a Chicago boom crane is involved. That's a crane that's a derrick, and the arm goes out, and you pick it up and move it. In my career, I've seen 3 projects where cranes have come down here in Los Angeles. So it happens. And yes, we mitigate, and yes, we do everything we can to control. We have safety measures, but it's still a crane. And a crane picks something up, and it's operator error. It's a lot of reasons. So that's why, from a safety perspective, we require, and surety requires, a fall zone and a safety zone for crane operations. There is no room on the site to protect the children and the staff from that fall zone. That was always true. So now we're looking at how do we mitigate it, how do we do it, and what would be the consequence? What difference would it really make in specific details? And that's what I think the staff is prepared. We began this analysis in February when the questions were asked in February. And I think now we're ready to show you precisely what that cost and what compels us to present to you our position in recommending that for El Rodeo, we have that one site as one project and move the children and the staff to another site. So I'll leave it to you, Jeff.
If this job were being done in the private sector, it would be emptied out, wouldn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
So no developer, if they were working with their own money, or would keep people there.
I'm not saying that people don't take risks. They do.
Right.
I'm just saying how much money does it cost and what measures do you need to take? When Jeff and I worked, one of the projects that Jeff was very successful with me doing was 2 performing arts centers that were started on the same day and finished on the same day. Both of them had these Chicago booms, these huge towering cranes in the middle picking up steel and concrete throughout the entire project. But that crane was located inside of the building. So if the crane were to fall or we had a problem, we were able to mitigate it to some extent, and there was enough distance from where people would be occupied from where that crane might fall. So the answer is you never really want to do it. Do we do it if we're building a high-rise downtown and we have a sidewalk? Yes, but it's done. You put it inside the building, in the center of the building, not at the outside of the building. These buildings are already erected, so the crane would have to go on the outside of the building.
So, Don, how long of a time span is the projected for the crane at El Rodeo, for the use of the crane there?
I would say the crane would probably be about, I would say 50% of the time. It's mostly, it's getting steel into the building and getting through the windows because
So
we're
it-
seismically retrofitting.
So
the
at least a
interiors.
year.
At least a year.
Okay.
Thank you, Don. The slide we have here is the bottom portion of the slide is a graphical representation of doing phase 1, which is buildings A, B, C, and D in the main pod of the camp of the property. Building E, which houses the cafeteria and the library, and the site, inclusive of the hardscape and softscape and parking areas, all in one phase. By combining those 3 phases together and comparing it to the original master plan, our estimates is that we can reduce the overall modernization of building of El Rodeo by 30 months, not including the elevated playfield and parking structure. In the timeline comparison above, item 1, you see that the overall master plan was 75 months, inclusive of the elevated playfields and parking structure, 57 months without. Item 2, the proposed timeline, assuming a vacated campus, is to complete the modernization in 27 months, with the exception of the parking structure, for a 30-month for a 30-month reduction overall. That would be completing the entire modernization in 27 months. In comparison, you see the footnote at the bottom of the page. The Horace Mann actual duration for modernization was just over 6.5 years.
Question for you. Will you be able to analyze, obviously it says to be reanalyzed, the parking structure. Is there anything precluding you from building it in some time frame along with all the other modernization or concurrently?
It is under a separate DSA number on a separate DSA
Okay.
track. That's one item. Some slight adjustments possibly need to be made to the footprint of that structure due to the DTSC findings that just wrapped up, as well as looking at the use and programming of the project again in today's era, and what is the cost-benefit analysis of the parking and the elevated playfields. Are those elevated playfields actually needed? I think we need to ask that questions to ourselves one last time.
Mr. Pileman, I just want to comment with regard to your asterisk there for 7 to 8 months, because I sat on the Horace Mann Facilities Committee, and some of my colleagues actually started the auditorium renovation, and that was separate and apart from the actual school construction. So that started like 2011, I believe it was, for the auditorium. It came online 2013.
12. It started in 12.
12, okay,
Yeah.
end of 11, early 12, and was finished in 13. And then there was a whole lot of nothing going on until
August of 14.
August of 14. So that includes months that there was just no construction
Right.
going on at all.
We're trying to eliminate a lot of nothings
Yeah.
because of the inflation factor and the
No, I
time
know.
cost
When I
of
got
money.
on the board, I was the one that said, let's
yeah,
get these
let's
things
go.
built before we can't afford
Let's
to do
go.
it. So, but I
Now-
just want to make sure when you say 7 to 8 months, that's from the original auditorium remodeling, then a whole lot of nothing occurred, and then in 2014 we got
Right.
at it. Okay.
And in retrospect, when we come back and look at our the B1 B2 job, we're going to go all the way back to the interim housing project and the abatement project. It's the overall time frame in which some of the facility or portion thereof is taking out of the programming and teaching space, and then the transition times between from one phase to the other, which a lot of times are driven by DSA.
So Jeff, do we know how much money we can save by shaving off, what is it, almost 30 months?
I put the next slide in for you.
Thank
But
you.
wait,
Scorpioff.
before we go on to the next slide, Jeff, for the parking structure being reanalyzed, whatever direction this takes, I'm assuming that the parking structure was never forget about the DSA number, but physically could never be part of the original construction. We have to
that has to be phased separately.
It would always need to come second. You were talking about lay down and space constraints.
Okay.
You need to build your way away from that building. So the parking structure is in the back corner. We're familiar with the property layout, and you would build your way out of that corner when you came out of it. So you modernize the building first, get the children in it, and then build your way out of that back corner.
And do you know where the, have you spoken about where the laydown for the parking structure project would be once the rest of the school is completed and occupied?
Yes, we're looking at that. It would either come out south towards Wilshire as you built your way out, or it would come out towards Whittier. You would have to build your way out of that box canyon.
Would staff still have a place to park during that phase?
The parking would be a challenge during that phase and something need to be analyzed. As there's not a whole
Thank
lot
you
of room
for the
there.
honesty, Jeff. So we're literally backed up into a corner.
Can I ask you a
literally.
question?
Backed
Is
into
it
a corner, but-
is it about 50 spaces again?
Yeah, I looked at the number of spaces and then the play surface on top. Again with it has to be analyzed with the projection enrollment projections. But that structure itself is going to, for the amount of spaces you're going to reap, and 2 basketball courts and 1 4-square court, I thought we should all just look at it together one last time.
Okay.
Because we already have 2 basketball courts on the other side of the campus.
But you want to analyze whatever
The
else
size
is going
and
on
scope.
besides
Size and scope.
How big is it now? I forget. Is it about 100 spaces or 80?
No, it's less than that. Don't quote me on this, but I will get back with you. I think it's around 55, 65 spaces.
But that's pretty much the bare minimum the school needs, I think.
Right.
Am I right? There's about 50 staff there
Correct.
altogether.
Correct.
And there's
But
always going to be people coming and going like Dr. Breggy or Dawn or someone.
once the interim housing is removed, and the rest of the site development is replaced with the play fields along Whittier and the corner of Wilshire, with the grass fields and the hard surface basketball courts over on that side of the campus, a portion of that back corner would again return to parking as it was one day
I
in the
see.
past.
And that holds about
And you
20 spaces if you
It
park
will-
tandem.
It will double the size of the current parking lot you have there today.
So if there's about 20 there tandem, you're saying we could do 40 tandem or even 25.
Possibly. It
So
depends
then we don't
on
need
the-
a huge parking structure. We don't need a
Possibly.
55-seat parking structure slot. We
Possibly.
Don't need,
Could that same square footage be shared between another basketball court, if
Sure.
that's what's desired,
Sure.
and parking to use that same acreage? Or do we want to elevate that 2 proposed basketball courts and park underneath it? So it's just something I think that from an economic standpoint, it's since we're in the middle of the DSA, we have some time to look at that.
Okay.
If it was ready to go and we could roll it all into one, and we would check our arithmetic from a couple years
Okay.
ago and move forward. But since we're in that slow DSA pathway, I think we have the opportunity to analyze it before the final back check set gets submitted.
So before the final back check, whomever can make adjustments.
Correct.
I have a question as a follow-up. Do we know if do we have plans for the parking structure that actually exist, or were they because I think there was some lack of clarity last time I asked this question. Did you all confirm that?
We have the design development, which are schematic, if you will. They have not gone into construction documents, which is the heavy design area. So if we want to make a change now without incurring a redesign cost with an architect or so on and so forth, now is the time to make that. Once you get into construction documents and then change the direction of the project, now we have to deal with architectural change requests and things of that nature.
Okay, great. Thank you.
The next slide is a cost analysis on the acceleration of the El Rodeo modernization, assuming a vacated campus, doing phases 1, 2, and 3 all in one. in a 27-month duration. You can see there's various items that we've analyzed for cost harvesting in this accelerated example. These do not include general administrative type of cost savings that Dr. Brege's team and staff would probably want to look at. These are directly related to construction, inclusive of the parking situation and shuttling of teachers that we would encounter if we continued with the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 sequence that currently was in the old master plan. There was some shuttling that happened during the abatement project. I think some of you were familiar with when they had the shuttle vans for the teachers over at El Rodeo. So that's just under $16 million projection, between 16 and 18% overall savings, and 30 months reduction in the modernization of that particular property, at which time Horace Mann would be modernized, El Rodeo would be fully modernized, and Beverly Vista is still working off of its construction in the mid-2000s.
So, Jeff, just can I get clarification on increased bidder participation? That number, that's a pretty large number. I'm not sure exactly what that means.
When I analyzed this, to be honest with you, the numbers on the top half of the sheet surprised me as being so large. I thought the numbers on the bottom half of the sheet were going to be larger. Again, these are estimates. Knowing from personal experience, there's a lot of contractors out there that know of this job for the last 3 or 4 years and are not going to bid it once it's on the street in its current configuration of not having any laydown area and anywhere to work. A contractor obviously is going to bid to be profitable, and the longer he's on a site, the less profitable he is. So there's 3 items at the bottom: is construction and inflation, which Mr. Blake spoke of. So we took that midpoint of inflation in that phase 2 and phase 3 and shifted that back into phase 1 and just did simple arithmetic to harvest that number. The economy of scale, again, more, bigger, faster, same management team. And then the bidder participation is more bids on bid day usually result in what? Better price.
Lower, yeah.
Better
Okay.
pricing.
Okay.
So I'd like to end with this slide and open it up for any questions. This presentation will be posted with the meeting minutes. And again, thank you for the time. Thank you for the opportunity.
Dr. Brege, because there's so few parents here, especially El Rodeo parents, I don't even know if there's one here, I'm not sure. One. Oh, that's right, Tristan. That's right, you are one. That's right. I think your youngest is in 8th grade there? Fifth. Oh, so you have a way to go. Okay. I think it would be only fair and transparent to make sure that the El Rodeo school community sees this. That I think either you or the principal should send it to them so that A, they're informed, B, they can't say we didn't tell them, we didn't, this is so extreme, the difference in terms of time and money, but I think what is overwhelmingly much more important than time or money is safety. So if we always think about safety, whether it's school safety in terms of armed guards or unarmed guards or Raptor, if we think about methane gas and staging areas and, what'd you say? Oil wells and diesel trucks, it would be the height of hypocrisy not to consider the safety here.
So I did reach out to Kevin Allen this afternoon to let him know that this would be presented, and so I think that's a great idea, and I think that in conjunction with the PTAs that we, Don, Jeff, and I could easily go and present this information.
The one thing that has always come up when I've talked to El Rodeo parents, because I was an El Rodeo parent for 13 years, is why is it taking so long? Why is it like 7 years? My kid is going to be in construction forever. And I knew DSA delayed us, and I understood staging and phasing. I understood the lay down, the tightness. But when you lay it out like that, it's shocking. It's like really trying to walk with your legs tied together. It's just very hard to get from A to B. So I happen to say that if I were just objectively speaking a parent sitting here watching it, I'd get it. First of all, I wouldn't want my kid on the campus with cranes and swings. And I wouldn't want the taxpayer to deal with this, and I certainly would want a project that's easier and more efficient to build. Yes.
Mrs. Korbutov, I would say.
Sorry,
I
excuse me.
would-
Can we get the lights, please? Thank you.
Thank you.
I would say this, that given the considerations of safety, of getting a campus up and completed in so much less time, and the obvious huge cost saving, I want to congratulate our construction control team for thinking outside the box and coming up with this kind of an opportunity, and assuming that there is a practical plan for relocating the students, and I'm sure there will be. I am 100% in favor of doing this.
So you have more to present, right, Dr. Breggy?
Sure, but
So-
if you have questions, that you'd
No, I
like-
think I want to thank Don and his team. I think that the presentation was thorough. I think for practical reasons and obvious safety reasons, as my colleagues have expressed, it makes sense from the ground. And also just the fact that, you know, we have to learn from the Horace Mann experience. And so I think that now that we have that behind us, we have to learn from that experience and try to make things much more practical going forward. So I do appreciate the vision and just really, as Mel said, thinking out of the box and for bringing this to us. It's always difficult to do something that is out of the box, but you've stated your case with a very good reason. So thank you.
Well, clearly, safety, expediency, and cost are all factors. Nothing more important than safety, clearly. A couple other things, I think, to kind of connect some of the thought process, and I think given the construction facilities presentation where this may be going, but in 2017, we had School Services of California evaluate our cost configuration. They didn't really look at construction. That wasn't a component of what they were looking at. Irrespective, when they came to their conclusion, they came to the realization that to be an effective school district, we should have 3 primary sites. They made some comments as to whether it's 3 K-8 or 2 K-5s in the middle school. They left that to the school district to determine, but irrespective, they looked at it and said this district needs to be 3 primary sites. We had the FFST. They spent months reviewing our configuration. They looked at costs. They looked at educational models and delivery. They also, I don't think, really looked much at construction because there was a lot we didn't know from DSA. We were getting updates 6 months to a year, every 6 months or a year from DSA. Now we're getting it every month because you're meeting with them, along with Mr. Blake, which makes a big difference because now we know what it looks like 2 to 3 months out, not 6 months or a year out, and we're just guessing. We're not guessing anymore. I think that's important. Superintendent, you made recommendations too, and with regard to your recommendation, irrespective of that recommendation back in January, it was also 3 primary sites as an efficiency model for this district. So from the standpoint of whatever this district may look like next year or the year after that or 10 years in the future, it clearly is a good opportunity to combine the reconfiguration and construction because that's where it's going. Let's just be, I see what's being presented here. And from a standpoint of living through, having children that lived through the Horace Mann construction, again, I was on the facilities committee. It was a difficult situation, and there was a lot of separation. I lived it every day. I was there. I was on that campus while they were constructing it. The ability to construct one half, and then the other made Horace Mann construction possible. But I think we learned a lot from it. It wasn't, as you said, optimal. It wasn't quiet. There were issues of noise, dust, sound, vibrations to the parents, and those were all concerns. There was all concerns. But again, there was enough distance in between that mitigated a lot of those concerns. I don't see a way when we see this that there's a practical way to mitigate those type of concerns that we had as parents during the Horace Mann project, which was able to be mitigated. I don't see how you do that here. So the fact that you can get this thing in and out and get kids out and back into that school within essentially 2.5 years, which is about 2 full school years, I think that is something to seriously consider. It's something that I know when we were talking about construction, when I got on the board, just to give you some history with Superintendent Gary Woods, we recognized the team that was in place, and you talked about it too, even with Nelson Kiyabyab and things like that, because of the footprint of that site, how difficult it would be to construct. We saw it under Gary Woods. We really got into it, I know with Superintendent Kessler and myself, with the construction team and the board looking at this, and that was just with where do you park the staff? It was untenable just to find parking for the staff, let alone what are you going to do with 100 or more contractors, and then we didn't even really think about that aspect of equipment on that site. Mr. Blake, when he took a look at this early on this year, started to tell us, guys, you need to take a hard look at this. I'm going to have a very difficult time to construct this site if it's operational. It almost becomes impossible, and he spent, I think, about 8 months trying to figure out a way to actually construct it with children on site, and I think we've come to a conclusion, at least from what I'm hearing today, that that's just not feasible. It's just practically safety, expediency, and cost doesn't make it reasonable to do that. So I think I agree with Mr. Spitz. I think this is something that we need to seriously consider as a board.
Thank you to the facilities team. 2 questions came into my mind. Of course, brilliance is hindsight. Could we have done Horace Mann differently back then? Could we have approached it differently? Probably yes. It was never the kind of out-of-the-box thinking wasn't even presented to us. Those thoughts were never discussed amongst the leadership at the time, and I would fault myself for not bringing it up as well. I've learned much since then. It's been a while. And that when we, 2.5, 3 years ago, when we vacated the buildings A through D at El Rodeo, should we have just vacated the campus at the time? That's the other questions. Now, of course, I'm saying these in hindsight, but they're kind of becoming training ground questions to how we operate in the future. What's happening now is what I'm finally seeing come together is the cogs click into place, is that our different departments are looking at things more holistically and not departmentally. And it's easy for our academic and education department to sit in their section and look at that. But what they start doing is they're looking at facilities, and you're looking at education, and you're looking at students. So when that starts to happen, we can hopefully find some sort of harmony and stop working in a vacuum, because that's been the practice in the past, and it continues to get us in trouble. So this is the first time I feel like we've kind of kicked the cobwebs out of the way, and everybody is looking at everything all the time. Because there's a ripple effect. We make a decision here. We make a decision based on information given to us and the best known information at the time, but the repercussions of that decision could be disastrous, could be great, but we're not considering the whole picture. And I'm finally seeing departments that are considering the whole picture at all times. So I thank you for that, and for giving us this information to digest and move forward with. I appreciate it.
So I just want to
So before I begin, I just want to add that coming into the tail end of Horace Mann, I was kind of glad that it was the tail end of that project, because as somebody that has had experience building schools in their school district in the past, I was really surprised that you were able to pull that off, and I'm glad that you did, and it's beautiful. The outcome is fantastic, but it was a little surprising to me due to that footprint just at Horace Mann, how you were able to do that. One thing that was also missing was the conversation. I struggled in the beginning to find my way into the conversation of construction when I first arrived and plans were finished. And so that made the work that was in front of me a little bit more difficult. When we started to look at potential reconfiguration, there were some things that we were really strong in, and those were areas where we were able to be transparent about our finances. I felt really good about having a good lay of the land as far as our current facilities. And then also, I had a great team and great staff that were willing to collaborate about how to improve the quality of instruction. So all of those things were there. When the future-focused team was built and began to work together, it was a bit of a struggle for me. And if you can see on this illustration, I just want you to see that we felt like we were pretty solid in so many of the areas when we had our sessions. And as I have mentioned before, those were some pretty incredible sessions where we learned a lot from each other. There were some red-faced conversations. We really pushed on one another to get a better understanding of what that meant to improve the quality of education. The thing that was missing from our discussions, and you can certainly ask people that were part of that group, is that we didn't really know where we were going with construction. So it's at that time, we had our Measure E dollars, and as we were talking about, it was difficult for us to give the cabinet, the public, future-focused, any specific information about where are we going with our construction, and that is a critical piece to our overall operations. And so what changed in January after the board said, we still have questions, we're not quite ready to make this decision, a lot of that fell in the area of the vision for construction and how does that work with facilities. And so just at that time, it was just shortly before that time when Mr. Blake came, he insisted that the superintendent be part of the conversations. And so, several hours a week in subcommittee, but then additional, whether it's the weekend or evenings, we've had a pretty tight collaboration, and I've learned certainly a lot about construction, and I know he has learned about best practices for teaching and learning, and that's been missing, and that's been in place since January. So after the board said, we're going to hold on a second, and we want to go back, and we have some questions for you, and so that started a really good dialogue between us, and so. This presentation is very short, but I think what's important about this is that there are some possibilities here after the questions that I've received from the Board of Education, also from the public, about how do we make this work. And we've had, since that time, ongoing analysis at our cabinet meetings with our school principals and our assistant principals. We've had ongoing conversations and an analysis of how do we move forward and how do we ensure that we are improving the quality of education for the school district. And certainly during that time, a big piece for us, thankfully, is that the community got behind Measure BH. And that really, for us, was the anchor that we needed to solve that missing piece about where are we going and how did we get to where we are today. So the triangle is just an illustration that it's really solid now that we have concrete information about what does our future look like. And that was a big piece that we didn't have before that we feel very confident about today. So we have this opportunity, and Don brought this up, and Jeff did, about the safety being our #1 priority, and it certainly is, whether whether it's another organization that's 15 feet away from our high school portables, or whether it's in our own construction area. We have to make sure that this is a top priority. And I think that we're headed in that right direction with this recommendation. It's an efficient use going forward as it relates to our overall improvement, whether it's with facilities or academically. But this is an opportunity to begin some dialogue about what our long-term future is going to be. So there are a few things that we can do. There's some possibilities here that I want for the board to consider. Is if we were to take El Rodeo offline for those 2 years, we could really relocate, and I'm going to kind of separate this a little bit, the K-5 students, and those students can be relocated. And those students could be relocated into and kept in their school families into Hawthorne. And the idea of the middle school, the consolidated middle school, is coming up again, because I feel like there is an opportunity to look at what we're currently doing for the elementary school, but also we have to keep in mind we have to improve the quality of learning in the school district. So there is a thought and an idea, and I've got a few others out there that I'll present to you, that include not only relocating El Rodeo K-5 students for a couple of years, but also then permanently relocating El Rodeo, Hawthorne, Horace Mann, grades 6 through 8 for the consolidated middle school at Beverly Vista. So I want you to look at this slide first. I do have some data for you, but we have spent some time analyzing the best way to do this so that we keep, if possible, school families together. This is a wonderful community that's built on relationships, and our kids know each other well, and sticking together is a significant part of our plan for our K through 5 students. So we've done some numbers, and the students at El Rodeo fit quite nicely, joining Hawthorne, staying all together K through 5. Beverly Vista school families, if that was a consolidated middle school, those students, because we have a TK program there, those TK through 5 students fit quite nicely in Horace Mann. And we've mapped this out in every classroom mapping situation with some improved educational programming occurring as well. And then finally, the entire El Rodeo, Hawthorne, Horace Mann school families, 6 to 8 to Beverly Vista. Here's just a little bit of data for you. Just gives you an idea of the overall enrollment for TK through 5 at El Rodeo. And so the population is 268 students, and those would be the students that could be moved and fit quite nicely with Hawthorne. So here's a little bit of information about current and proposed, because this is a question that might come up as far as what do the schools currently have. So currently, right now, Hawthorne TK through 8. So currently, there's approximately 556 students. If those K-5 students were moved to Hawthorne, and I put just New Hawthorne, and that was a TK through 5 school, the total of that school would be 565. So relatively no change at all to the number of students that would be attending Hawthorne, but it would be a TK through 5 school. And then looking at Horace Mann, currently is a K-8 school and has 565 students. With the Beverly Vista K-5 students, that would be moved to make way for a consolidated middle school. That would move Horace Mann's population to 718 students in that brand new building that easily has space and room. And then also looking at Beverly Vista, currently as a TK-8 school, it's our largest school. in the district. As far as our K-8s, there's 712 students. And the new Beverly Vista, so that would be the 6th, 7th, and 8th grades, Consolidated Middle School, would put us at 952, which is an outstanding size for a thriving middle school. And you can check the research on that. So looking at just how many grades 6 through 8 would be moved into the Consolidated Middle School, I just wanted to give you a little bit more, some of the numbers that we've been analyzing. We did take the current enrollment. So we took the current enrollment and we moved it forward by a year. So if you're looking at those numbers, we took our current 6th graders and we made them 7th graders, so 75. So we just used our current enrollment and we moved it up a year. So there are other possibilities, and I want to be transparent about that. I do think that this is an opportunity not only for safety but for financial reasons, but this is an incredible opportunity for us academically to move forward. But there are other thoughts, and so I don't want to be looked at as I'm swaying you one direction or another, although it is my job to give you my recommendation. The TK8 model, when the Future Focused Group and the cabinet gave their recommendation, that's our existing model, and that's the traditional model of our school district. And so that is a possibility. Moving students out of El Rodeo is a possibility, and then keeping the TK through 8 traditional model. The problem with that is that you cannot move the entire building and keep school families together. So what that would result in is a complete change in reestablishment of district boundaries, not just for El Rodeo, but for our entire school district. And so that is a very large change and disruption to every family in the school district. And I don't know if you have lived through boundary changes in your past, but I have. And they're very, very difficult to put together, and especially when they have been in place for as long as they have in our school district. So the other possibility is not a recommendation at all, but I do want you to know that we are trying to think out of the box. Grade centers that actually came up in our future focused group as well, and our community members immediately said that was not something that they would be interested in, and that would be looking at our 3 sites as grade centers. So Hawthorne having your primary, Horace Mann being more of an intermediate center, and Beverly Vista then being our consolidated middle school. So that, again, is not something that we would recommend, but I want to just put that out there that, that is another possibility to support the safety that's needed at El Rodeo. So I've passed out for you a form, and I'll make sure that this is on our website, and I'm going to take this opportunity to tell you, as a longtime educator and former principal and 9-year superintendent, that we are not providing the robust middle school that our children deserve. And every day that goes by, when I see missed opportunities in the classroom, and I see students having to choose between a foreign language and an honors math class, or having to pick up an instrument or be in an honors class, is a day that we are failing our students academically, social emotional, and the extracurricular opportunities that we are not providing, because we can't have 4 basketball teams at each middle school with the low number of students that we have. But we can with 1. The time of life for an adolescent is the most critical time in a young learner's life, and we can do better. And I realize that this is controversial, but it's a recommendation that the Future Focused Schools team had. also the cabinet. And so with the information that we have now, provides us with an incredible opportunity to create a long-term plan for our school district. And it's something that I would certainly hope that you would consider and that we can have further analysis on in the future. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, since Ms. Korbutov set out, yeah, can we get the lights on again? Thank you. Since Ms. Korbutov stepped out, I want to make sure that we're clear that this is a facility study session. So I don't know how prepared or should we go into the academic discussion of your recommendation here. I would rather do that in a dedicated time.
Sure.
But I think we can still question as far as facilities are related and your presentation. I think that would be appropriate to bring up. So I'll start at that end.
Just one quick, not really a question, more of a, I guess, a recommendation. If there are any future actions to do more research into this, like a new FFST, I don't know what actions you hope to take. If we could include students on whatever committee it is that does research, I think that would be a great help. Because looking back on like what the FFST did, I feel like having student insight or just having them there to share their opinions or voices on what they experience on a daily basis, whether it's a middle school student or a high school student, I think that could be a great idea. So I could help coordinate that with you, Dr. Breggy, if we need to, but I think that'd be a great idea to have students be more involved with this.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Spitz?
Yes, please. Dr. Breggy, considering the aspects of construction, the advantages of taking the students out for 2 years out of El Rodeo to get that construction done, and done at a much lower cost and a much higher level of safety. Assuming that the board was inclined to support staff's recommendation to convert to the one middle school. Do your studies indicate that this could be achieved in the 2019-20 year, that the transition could be affected with that in that year?
So I'm glad that you brought that question up, because if you think back to our time with the Future Focused Schools team, and we were working from September, October into even January, that was a really tough call. And if I remember correctly, I think you asked that same question in January. And that was a really difficult thing to pull off. Because it's October, we could absolutely do something for the 1920 school year. We are months ahead of where we would need to be, and it would take a great deal of time, and it's something that I would like to, if that is the direction from the board, to really spend a great deal amount of time, because it does include a lot of change for staff as well. But it can be done.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we do have answers to those questions, and we wanted to respect that this is a study session. But I really do think it's important that people realize that this is so closely tied into our work for a long-term plan. So I respect that very much, and we have those answers. We want to be able to share that with you as soon as possible. But I think that we'd be happy to put that something together and share that publicly. That is something that we said that we would do after the board asked us to do that at the end of January, beginning of February.
I'm sorry, would that be something that you guys might be ready to do at the next regular meeting?
Yes, we've been working on.
You're that ready?
We're that ready.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Goldstein.
Okay, so back in January, you had what I would call a hypothesis. You presented after the FFST. It looked somewhat similar to this, and understandably so, because it was missing the construction component.
Correct.
It wasn't considered, and you've now filled that block in the triangle, as you said. I'm going to make the same comment, and I think my colleagues have touched on it now. The same issues I had in January, I have right at this moment. We haven't seen the plan, and I understand now you've represented, you're working on it, and it's going to be presented. What I want to see, when you look at these buildings, you're looking at the diaphragms of the buildings, Horace Mann or Hawthorne, and to ask the $16 million question, but more importantly for safety reasons, but can they fit in either of these models? Can the students fit? Have you mapped that out?
We have.
Okay, we just haven't been presented.
We just haven't shared that with you, but we ran a master schedule for the schools to ensure that every classroom was accounted for and the number of staff, and so we have done that, and we're be happy to share that with you.
Okay, well, I'll accept your representation. I will trust, but I would like to verify.
You bet.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dr. Brady, I'm not sure who has the answer to this. So under the current and proposed school enrollment, you have new Horace Mann with grades TK through 5 at 718. Do you know what the capacity of that building is, the maximum capacity? Do we know what that is? Do you know?
Oh, yeah, I remember. It was between 8 and 900. I think we settled on 8 or 850.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it was.
It's just under 900.
It was. I remember we thought 900 was too much, and we kind of, because we were going to put a third floor, and then we abandoned that.
What's the actual capacity of this building?
I'm sorry, one was fresh in my mind. I hate to jump in.
Let me circle back because everybody
class size in your list and ask.
Okay.
Thank
everybody
you.
spoke. Everybody spoke up about this. So is it 830? Is it 850? What? Just one person answer.
So
just
the instructional space when we were calculating, it's 1 to 23 for classes K through 3rd, and then 4 and 5 would have been at classes of 29, and we were going to run 5 sections of each class. So 5 kinder, 5 first, 5 second, 5 third, 5 fourth, and 5 fifth. So that way we wouldn't lose or gain any, and we would keep it structured.
And you're keeping those classes at 23, not higher.
Yeah.
Okay.
29 if we had any.
And that's a max, I assume. I mean, you have to.
That'd be
So
a cap.
now, let me go back to my other question. What is the maximum capacity of that building?
830.
830. That's the maximum capacity. So we're over 100 less than that. So that's way under. Okay. So my other question would then go to Beverly Vista. What is the maximum capacity of Beverly Vista at 952 middle school students?
So scheduling the 952 middle school students, we still had from our outline where we would have instructional space that we could create maker spaces, which would just be a check-in, check-out space. So the way that we had set up in the pods from an instructional standpoint, our science labs were empty spaces, even with scheduling the 952 students, meaning we could use them. Our world's our oyster at that point of what money are we going to reinvest in? Can we offer 2 maker spaces? Can we create a robotics center? Can we do a junior television center?
So could you grow another 100 students at Beverly Vista? See, at some point you're going to hit capacity there, and if this wonderful middle school is as wonderful as you say it will be, then you might, right?
So
Lisa's mantra is that if you build it, they will come. So if we keep finishing things and everything looks great, they're going to be lining up outside the door. So we have to be prepared to say at what point are we actually at capacity, and I guess that would go towards a future plan, perhaps, of either to add space or supplement space at that site to be able to, because you're talking about the existing building right now. We're not talking about modifications, right, Mr. Blake?
Right.
There were small minor things, I think, that were discussed about, raising toilets and things like that, but that's minor.
Right, which brings some long-term thoughts and decisions about,
Dr. Brady?
do you have a building that, like Hawthorne, that hasn't been modernized, and does that become part of the discussion? Is that, the next bond that we design and build a middle school that was
Right.
purposefully built to be a middle school?
Okay,
That's
so what it
possibility.
does is it gives us flexibility and options, which
Right.
is a wonderful power to have, which a lot of people don't get that.
Can I ask you a question, Dr. Bergman?
Sure.
I apologize. I have to leave. I didn't think we'd go over 90 minutes, but we are, and that's fine. It's all good. It's good discussion. I just have a couple questions, and then I can leave you to ruminate on them. One question is traffic mitigation. I may have missed it when I stepped out for a call at BV. What kind of drop-off, pickup, how are you going to stagger assemblies, maybe through grade level? But drop-off and pickup is really going to be challenging. The second question I have is how much money will we save going to 3 K8s versus 2 K5s and a middle school?
Well, Ms. Gorbachev, Ms. Hacker asked about those
Okay.
those questions, which were from the board. We'll come back at the next
Okay,
meeting.
that's fine. I
and
didn't
we'll
know.
have answers to those
And then
things.
the last question I have is if you hit capacity at BV, and you very well may, faster than you think, have you looked at El Rodeo down the road when it's completed? How many would that hold? That campus is, I believe, almost 7 acres. I had heard once it was 8, and then I was corrected 6.5. Let's call it 7. 7 acres is bigger than BV. I believe BV is 4.
Historically, over the last 10 years, El Rodeo is the actual only school that held over 1,000 students.
Okay, so that's why I get to that point, because my kids were there when they were just, busted at the seams, which was fine. It still was smooth. Pickup and drop off was not so great, but it's just never great there. Can you guys look into that? Because in a couple years, if you see that you're just bursting at the seams at BV, I know it's not lovely to say, but you may have to flip to El Rodeo. But at that point, I think people are going to be settled into the K5 and the 6-8 if you're going to be at BV and it's just too many kids and you end up at El Rodeo. It's a brand new school. It's on the edge of town, but it's towards the high school. There's traffic no matter what. It's just what it is. We just live in an urban environment. So could you kind of think about that? I just kind of think that future boards should know that we at least asked the question, that we at least thought about it, that you thought about it.
Sure.
None of us will be here maybe in 5 years if this were to happen,
Sure.
or
Yeah.
sooner or later.
No, and I think
No, you'll be here hopefully breathing and walking and talking, just maybe not at this dais.
I think keeping school families together is really important. So if that were to come and there needed to be a move, then it's a lot easier to move 6th, 7th, and 8th school families together without reestablishing all of the boundaries.
So
Because at that point, it would only be that they're not driving there, they're driving there, but at least they know that
Correct.
they're going as little groups together.
Right.
Nothing much, and quite frankly, it's not tragic to go to a brand-new school. BV is in great shape, but it's,
Right.
what is it, 15 years old already? That school will be literally brand new.
I did have a couple more comments. I was on the phone with somebody who has a child at a middle school in North Long Beach, and they were saying, I had to go to my child's volleyball game. And I said, is that club volleyball? And they go, no, the middle school has a volleyball team. And I was like, oh, how
Right.
novel. That's
Right.
fascinating. I think we're missing the boat on that one completely. And also, you had mentioned the idea of this being controversial, and I just wanted to make the statement that I don't think improving academics should ever be controversial. So maybe physical buildings and where a body is becomes controversial,
Right.
but the idea of improving academics should be welcomed. So that's all.
I
that's all have
certainly
to
agree
say.
with that statement.
Thank you, Mr. Spitz. Okay.
Sorry, really quick. I just realized I lost track of time. I have to be upstairs right now at the college fair because I'm helping out. So I'm going to excuse myself.
See you soon.
And
We're just about done, I believe. So I'll fill you in if it's anything really important. Wait till he leaves and then take his sign away. No.
So along the lines, since it's a facilities discussion, I'd like to see on that chart a new demographic study done in 2020. That was a recommendation from the Davis Demographics that we do it in 20. So by 2020, you'll have an indication if your enrollment's still declining or if it's starting to flatten
Bump
out
up
or
again.
increase.
Right.
And that'll give you some direction on how you're going to proceed on the outlying years.
Right, with a future middle school.
So just
and
as a placeholder, if I could ask to be placed
Sure.
for the next board so they don't forget about it. Great, thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Margot?
Yes, Mr. Spitz.
Just maybe a final thought on everything that we've discussed today. It seems to me that the ball now is in our court and staff's. There are some significant decisions to be made within the next month or two, I would say.
Easily.
And it's going to be, they're decisions that are rare, transformational, and I'm really looking forward to working with my colleagues and staff in arriving at good, solid, make sense decisions.
I concur. I think during this process, Dr. Breggy, questions and study sessions bring up new questions and new opportunities, and that's been happening since February. And I think the community should be aware that we have all been on top of this, especially you and your staff, on working through these issues and the questions. And it hasn't stopped the board from continuing to bring new questions to you as you come closer to a recommendation. I believe it kind of forces us to hold up our hand and say, wait, did you think about this? And that's what we keep doing. So it's been an ongoing process, and I think we've all been part of that process, and I'm proud of that process because that's what we actually do. So it seems to that aspect has been working, and we've all gotten a good education in this whole topic as well. So if there are no more questions, are there more questions? Okay, then I think we're finished today. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Kbev students. We will. Some of us are hopping up to the college fair. Go colleges, and we will all see you at the next meeting. Adjourned.
Thank you.
No, be well.
Michael? Yes, sir. I think that sheet of yours is fabulous.
Thank you, and thank you. And
Check. Check, check, check. Check, check.
Don, thank you very much. That was really comprehensive. It's like a gauntlet over here. So I have to watch. It's like a gauntlet. No, I haven't. Hi, Kevin. Howard Olson. How are you? Pleasure. compliance. So 18 months from now, when the next board gets here and they have their performance audit, guess what? There'll be 0 deficiencies, right?
Yes.
We'll see. Yes. All right. So thank you for that. It's been a long time coming. I think we are on a course to get these buildings done, and everybody uses the expression on time and on budget. Well, after our go-arounds with DSA, I don't know about on time anymore, but definitely will stay on budget because of these. So thank you for your hard work, and in relatively short period of time.
I think it'll be nice, though, for the first time since the inception of Measure E, that the district won't get written out by the COC on their annual report, and that area will disappear from their findings. So I think this is great.
Except we're not going to see that for like another year and a half,
No,
right?
no, this is in place